The scent of stale tobacco and shattered dreams often clings to places like this. But today, it's the silence that's most striking, a silence that holds more weight than any gavel. It all began with a quiet entrance, a man moving through the murmurs of a crowd that judged him before he even found a seat. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe quiet genius always finds a way, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Dust clung to his boots, a fine, reddish powder that spoke of long roads and patient journeys, as Elias Thorne walked into the auction hall. Heads, topped with wide-brimmed hats and bonnets, turned, not in welcome, but with the slow, dismissive appraisal reserved for outsiders, especially those whose skin told a different story than their own. Smirks were exchanged like currency, and sideways glances, heavy with unspoken assumptions, followed him down the narrow aisle. He didn't speak, offered no greeting to the hostile air, just a slight, almost imperceptible tip of his weathered hat as his gaze, steady and unhurried, scanned the room. He took a seat near the back, a lone figure against a backdrop of local landowners, speculators, and the merely curious, unnoticed by most but, as events would soon prove, underestimated by all. The air was thick with anticipation, not for him, but for the spoils to be had. He was a shadow, easily dismissed, until a single moment, a single spoken word, flipped everything they thought they knew. But what happened next would change everything. Elias Thorne was a man carved from the unforgiving landscapes he'd traversed, his spirit tempered by solitude and the quiet wisdom gleaned from years of listening more than speaking. His past was etched into the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw, a testament to hard labor, shrewd dealings, and an unyielding belief in the value of things others discarded. He'd herded cattle across plains so vast they swallowed the sun, saved every spare coin from wages earned breaking horses no one else would touch, and learned the language of the land, its subtle promises and hidden treasures. His emotional state was one of carefully guarded composure, a calm surface above a deep reservoir of resilience. He'd endured countless slights, the casual cruelties of a world that often judged a man by the color of his skin or the perceived emptiness of his pockets, yet bitterness had found no purchase in him. Instead, these experiences had honed a sharp observational skill, an ability to see beneath the surface, to discern the true worth of a person, a piece of land, or an opportunity. His worldview was simple. Everything, and everyone, had potential, often obscured by neglect or misunderstanding. He carried with him the memory of his father, a sharecropper whose hands were as calloused as his own, but whose dreams had always soared beyond the meager acres he'd tilled. "Son," his father would say, his voice raspy from years of dust and sun, "don't let another man's small mind dictate the size of your world. Value ain't always shiny, and it ain't always loud. Sometimes, you gotta dig for it, or simply see it when others are blind." Those words were a bedrock for Elias, a guiding principle. He was alone in the auction hall, physically, but his father's wisdom was a silent, steadfast companion. The antagonist in this unfolding drama wasn't a single individual, not yet, but the collective weight of prejudice that filled the room, the smug assurance of the established order. It was embodied in men like Silas Blackwood, a prominent rancher whose land holdings already stretched across 3 counties. Blackwood, seated near the front, surrounded by his cronies, cast a particularly disdainful glance towards the back as Elias settled. A quiet, cutting remark, something about strays wandering in, drifted from Blackwood's group, easily overheard, meant to be overheard. Elias registered it, filed it away, his expression unchanging. The auction hall itself was a microcosm of the larger world, a grand, slightly dilapidated building in the heart of Redemption, a town whose name seemed more an ironic jest than a statement of character. Redemption was failing, its businesses shuttered, its people drifting away, another casualty of a railroad bypass and a series of droughts. It was this very town, in its entirety, its dusty streets, its faded storefronts, its forgotten hopes, that was the centerpiece of today's auction, put up for sale by a distant bank that had foreclosed on the town's collective debt. Few saw a future for Redemption. Elias saw a canvas. His worn but meticulously cared for attire, the quiet confidence in his posture, hinted at a substance few in that room were inclined to acknowledge. He knew the details of the town's charter, its untapped water rights, the overlooked seam of quartz in the nearby hills, information gleaned from weeks of patient research, while others had merely seen a ghost town waiting to be buried. The auctioneer, a portly man with a booming voice and a practiced rhythm, finally arrived at the main event. "All right, folks," he bellowed, his tone suggesting this was more a formality, a piece of unpleasant business to get through quickly. "Lot number 47. The incorporated township of Redemption. Land, buildings, and all sundries included. A real fixer-upper, as they say. A few nervous titters ran through the crowd. We'll start the bidding at, say, $500 for the lot? He looked around, expecting a quick, low offer from a local speculator looking to pick up cheap acreage, or perhaps a representative from a timber company that might want the surrounding land. This dismissive presentation, the almost comically low starting bid for what was, essentially, the bones of a community, struck a chord deep within Elias. It mirrored the countless times he, his father, and men like them had been undervalued, their potential written off before they'd even had a chance to speak. This wasn't just about land or buildings. It was about dignity, about the chance to breathe life back into something others had left for dead. He took a slow, deliberate breath. The murmurs, the lingering smirks aimed in his direction, no longer felt like an insult, but a confirmation. He had seen what they could not. He would not be goaded into early action. His father's voice echoed, "Patience, son. Let the fast money burn itself out." Before the auction for Redemption began, a smaller, less significant lot came up, a collection of old harnesses and a broken wagon wheel. On an impulse, or perhaps a calculated move to test the waters, Elias placed a modest bid. $10, his voice, though quiet, carried clearly in a momentary lull. Heads turned, surprised. The auctioneer, momentarily startled by a bid from the shadowed corner, quickly recovered. $10 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 12? He got his 12. Then Elias, with calm deliberation, bid 15. It was a small, inconsequential victory, but his voice had been heard, his presence registered, drawing a few more curious, if still skeptical, glances. The bidding for Redemption commenced. As expected, a couple of local businessmen, known for snapping up distressed properties, made tentative offers. The price crept up slowly. 500 became 750, then 1,000. Silas Blackwood, the wealthy rancher, watched with an amused detachment, occasionally murmuring to his companions, clearly not seeing this as serious competition yet. Elias remained silent, his gaze fixed on the auctioneer, his posture relaxed but attentive. He let the smaller fish nibble, letting them establish what they thought was the town's meager worth. He'd spent weeks before this auction not just poring over maps and ledgers related to Redemption, but also studying the patterns of men like Blackwood, observing their tendencies at past auctions, their tells, their limits when their ego was on the line. He knew Redemption's true potential lay in its overlooked water rights, critical in this arid region, and the dormant railway spur that, with a little investment, could be revived. These were details the bank's prospectus had downplayed, details the quick-glance speculators had missed. The bidding stalled at $2,500. One of the initial bidders, a shopkeeper from a neighboring town, shook his head and folded his arms. The other, a thin, nervous man representing an out-of-state land company, looked hesitant. This was the moment. Elias felt a familiar stillness settle over him, the calm before a decisive act. Yet, a flicker of doubt, cold and sharp, pricked at him. The sum, though still modest for an entire town, represented a significant portion of his life savings. Was he being foolish? Was his father's wisdom leading him to overreach? He thought of the endless horizon he wanted to build, a place where a man's worth wasn't predetermined by prejudice, a sanctuary. The memory solidified his resolve. It was then that Silas Blackwood decided to make his move, less out of genuine interest in Redemption itself, Elias suspected, and more to assert his dominance, to ensure no upstart managed to snag even this forgotten parcel. 3,000, Blackwood called out, his voice laced with arrogance, a dismissive wave of his hand accompanying the bid as if he were swatting a fly. He shot a pointed look towards the back of the room, a smirk playing on his lips, clearly intended for Elias. The challenge was unmistakable. The auctioneer, sensing a more serious player had entered, brightened. 3,000 from Mr. Blackwood. Do I hear 3,500? The nervous land agent shook his head and stepped back. The room fell quiet, all eyes now on Blackwood, then flickering towards the silent figure in the rear. Blackwood leaned back, confident, accepting the perceived victory. The silence stretched. Elias let it hang, let Blackwood savor his presumed triumph. Then, into that silence, Elias's voice, calm and clear, resonated through the hall. 5,000. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Heads swiveled, disbelief etched on faces. 5,000. From him? The smirks vanished, replaced by wide eyes and open mouths. Blackwood, who had been preening, sat bolt upright. his face flushing a dull red. The auctioneer's professional composure momentarily slipped, his eyebrows shooting up. 5,000 from the gentleman in the back. His voice now carried a new note of respect, or at least, startled curiosity. This wasn't just a token bid. This was a declaration. The game had changed. The perception of Elias Thorne, the overlooked man in the dusty boots, was shifting with every beat of the auctioneer's gavel. The next few minutes would determine the fate of an entire community and perhaps redefine what was possible in a room so accustomed to its own certainties. The air crackled. Blackwood, recovering from his initial shock, scowled. This was an affront. He wouldn't be outbid, certainly not by this. Nobody. 6,000. He barked, his voice tight with irritation. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and the idea of this quiet, unassuming black cowboy challenging him was infuriating. Elias didn't flinch. He'd anticipated this. Blackwood was bidding with ego now, not just business sense. Elias had a ceiling, a carefully calculated maximum based on redemption's true, hidden value, and his own hard-earned capital. He also had a strategy, honed from watching countless poker games and livestock auctions. Never show your whole hand, and let your opponent's emotion become their undoing. He waited for the auctioneer's call. 6,000 from Mr. Blackwood. Do I have 7? 7,000, Elias stated, his tone even, giving no hint of the adrenaline coursing through him. He was pushing his own limits, but his research on redemption's potential, the forgotten mineral rights, the possibility of irrigating the valley with the old river rights, bolstered his courage. The bidding now became a stark duel. The rest of the room faded into a silent, astonished audience. Each bid from Elias was met with a swift, angry counter from Blackwood. 8,000. 9. 10. The numbers climbed, each increment stripping away another layer of the crowd's skepticism, replacing it with a kind of odd fascination. Blackwood was visibly agitated, his face growing darker, conferring in harsh whispers with one of his associates who looked increasingly concerned. He was being drawn into a battle he hadn't anticipated, on terms he didn't control. With each calm, firm bid, Elias was dismantling not just Blackwood's financial strategy, but the unspoken hierarchy of the room. The auctioneer, now fully caught up in the drama, his voice ringing with excitement, called out, $15,000 from Mr. Blackwood. Do I hear 16? This was a significant jump, a clear attempt by Blackwood to deliver a knockout blow, to scare off his persistent, enigmatic challenger. The sum hung in the air, heavy and potent. The crowd held its breath. For a moment, Elias allowed a flicker of hesitation to show, a slight pause. He saw a flash of triumph in Blackwood's eyes. It was precisely the reaction he wanted. Then, just as the auctioneer was about to call it, Elias spoke, his voice cutting through the tension, still measured, still calm. 20,000. A stunned silence engulfed the hall. $20,000. It was an unimaginable sum for a forgotten town, at least to everyone but Elias. Blackwood stared, his jaw slack. His associate was frantically shaking his head. The auctioneer's eyes were wide. $20,000, he stammered. Then, regaining his professional cadence, $20,000 from the gentleman. Going once. He looked at Blackwood, whose face was a mask of fury and disbelief. Blackwood opened his mouth, then closed it, deflating. He threw his hands up in a gesture of angry resignation. Going twice. The auctioneer's gaze swept the room. No other bidders dared to enter this high-stakes arena. All eyes were fixed on Elias, this quiet man who had just rewritten the day's script. Sold. The gavel cracked down with the finality of a gunshot. For $20,000, to the gentleman in the back. For a long moment, the only sound was the echo of the gavel and the collective, indrawn breath of the assembly. Elias Thorne sat still, allowing the reality of the moment to settle over him. He had done it. He owned redemption. He felt a profound sense of quiet triumph, not of arrogance, but of vindication. The years of toil, the savings, the careful planning, the enduring belief in his own judgment and his father's wisdom, it had all led to this. Internally, a storm of emotions churned, the lingering thrill of the risk, the immense weight of the responsibility he'd just shouldered, and a deep, resonant pride that warmed him from the inside out. He thought of the faces in the room, their expressions transformed from mockery to stunned respect. He had sought not their approval, but their acknowledgement of possibility. He rose slowly and made his way to the front of the hall, the crowd parting before him, their silence no longer dismissive but filled with a hesitant, almost fearful, awe. Silas Blackwood sat slumped in his chair, his face ashen, refusing to meet Elias's gaze. The auctioneer, His demeanor, now one of utter deference, greeted him with a professional but respectful nod. "Congratulations, Mr. Thorne," Elias supplied quietly. Elias Thorne. As he signed the papers, his hand steady, and presented the bank draft that covered the full amount, he felt a sense of peace descend. The implications of this purchase, he knew, would ripple through the county for years to come. A black man now owned not just a piece of land, but an entire town, a town named Redemption. As he accepted the deed, a tangible symbol of his audacious victory, an old man who looked like he might have been one of Redemption's last remaining residents, his clothes worn but clean, approached him. There was no mockery in his eyes, only a tentative, almost bewildered hope. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice quavering slightly, What are you going to do with it?" "With Redemption?" Elias met the man's gaze, offering a small, reassuring smile. "We," he said, the word encompassing more than just himself, "are going to bring it back to life." He gave a polite nod, the deed held firmly in his hand. He exited the auction hall into the bright afternoon sun. The light felt different on his skin, sharper, clearer. The dust on his boots, once a symbol of his journey, now felt like the very foundation of the future he intended to build. He paused for a moment, looking towards the distant, hazy outline of the hills that cradled the town he now owned. His father's words came back to him, as clear as if he were standing beside him. "Son, value is where you make it." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Elias Thorne's lips. He tipped his hat, not to any individual, but to the horizon, to the town that was now his responsibility, his challenge, his hope. Then, with a steady stride, he walked towards his horse, ready to begin the real work. This story is a testament to quiet strength and vision, a reminder that true value is often overlooked, and that one person's determination can change the course of a community. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.